Soft piano begins to play as the screen fades in, a slow montage of the way we were. Barbra Streisand's expressive eyes meeting Robert Redford's golden calm, the bittersweet score swelling behind them. The audience is instantly transported to another era, an age of true movie romance, when love on screen felt painfully, beautifully real. What was the connection between these two Hollywood legends? The narrator begins, voice low and steady, almost reflective. A chemistry that defined an era. Two stars who, for a moment, made the world believe in love that could never fade. And now, after the tragic passing of Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand has finally broken her silence. The images shift, Redford in his later years at Sundance, Streisand at home surrounded by art and music. Both icons of their craft, both larger than life, yet deeply human. Tonight, the voice continues. We explore their untold story, a connection born under the bright lights of Hollywood, sustained through decades of distance, and now sealed forever by time and loss. The narration pauses. Were they ever truly in love? Was the passion that burned on screen real behind the camera? What did Streisand say in her first heartbreaking public reaction, and what did it reveal about their final moments together? Clips of their interviews flash. Streisand's laughter in a vintage talk show, Redford's quiet humility in a later interview, his crinkled smile that somehow still mirrored the young Hubble Gardner from The Way We Were. The truth, the narrator whispers, is hidden in their memories, in every stolen glance, every shared laugh, every word never spoken aloud. A slow fade to black. Then, a tease of what's to come. We'll journey through their shared moments, the film that made history, the friendship that transcended fame, and the words Barbra Streisand has now shared with the world. Her final goodbye to the man who defined an era of love stories. This is Barbra Streisand Breaks Silence after Robert Redford's tragic death. The title fades onto the screen in gold letters as the orchestral version of The Way We Were swells, nostalgic, haunting, and deeply human, setting the emotional tone for the story about to unfold. Two names, Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford, that have defined elegance, intelligence, and artistry for more than half a century. To speak of Hollywood without mentioning them feels incomplete. Their lives were separate constellations of talent, but when their paths crossed, the universe seemed to pause and watch. Barbra Streisand's journey began in the heart of Brooklyn, born in 1942 to a modest Jewish family. From the very start, she was a voice that refused to be ignored, clear, powerful, emotional, and unmistakably unique. She wasn't the traditional image of a star in the 1960s, yet she became one through sheer talent and determination. Streisand conquered every corner of entertainment, a record-breaking singer with more than 150 million albums sold, a Broadway and film sensation, and one of the few women in Hollywood's history to successfully step behind the camera as a director, writer, and producer. Her 2 Academy Awards, 10 Grammys, 5 Emmys, and countless other honors have made her not just an entertainer but a cultural symbol of independence and excellence. Then there's Robert Redford, born in 1936, a California boy with the golden look of a movie idol and the depth of a philosopher. He wasn't just another handsome leading man. He embodied the conscience of American cinema. After rising to fame in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting, Redford became the face of the 1970s. Smart, grounded, quietly rebellious. His performances carried an honesty that made audiences believe every word he spoke. Beyond acting, Redford became one of Hollywood's great visionaries. His directorial debut, Ordinary People, won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Director. He went on to build the Sundance Institute and the Sundance Film Festival, shaping generations of independent filmmakers. And through his environmental activism, he used his influence not for glamour, but for good, fighting for the protection of nature, the planet, and integrity in art. When these two worlds collided in 1973, something magical happened. The Way We Were wasn't just another romantic drama. It was lightning in a bottle. Streisand played Katie Morrisky, an idealistic, outspoken woman driven by passion and conviction. Redford played Hubble Gardner, a charming, effortless writer who seemed to glide through life. They couldn't have been more different, and that was exactly why audiences fell in love with them. Their chemistry was raw, unforced, and heartbreakingly real. The way Streisand looked at him, with admiration, frustration, and longing, and the way Redford smiled back with quiet tenderness created a cinematic connection that still feels alive decades later. The Way We Were didn't just tell a story about love, it captured the essence of impossible love, of two people who could never truly belong to the same world but would never forget each other. The song, the looks, the silences, all became part of Hollywood's emotional DNA. And now, with Robert Redford's passing in September 2025, that story feels different. It feels heavier, more fragile. Fans aren't just mourning an actor, they're mourning the last piece of a timeless pairing. When Streisand finally broke her silence, the world leaned in, hoping to hear her heart, to feel what she felt. Because for millions, their connection wasn't just a movie. It was a reflection of something real, the beauty and pain of love that lingers long after the last goodbye. When The Way We Were premiered in 1973, audiences didn't just walk into a theater, they stepped into an emotional storm that would stay with them for generations. Directed by Sydney Pollack, the film tells the story of two people who never should have fallen in love, but did anyway. Barbra Streisand plays Katie Morosky, a fiercely idealistic woman whose heart burns for justice and truth. She's passionate, political, and unafraid to challenge anyone, even the man she loves. Robert Redford plays Hubble Gardner, a charming, easygoing writer who seems to glide through life untouched by the world's turmoil. Together, they create a love story that is as intoxicating as it is doomed. The film begins in the late 1930s and follows Katie and Hubble through college, World War II, and into post-war America. Their attraction is magnetic but fraught with tension. Katie loves Hubble's beauty and grace. Hubble is drawn to her fire and conviction. Yet, their opposing ideals, her activism versus his detachment, become the very thing that tears them apart. Theirs isn't a fairy tale romance, it's painfully human. By the end, when Katie sees Hubble one last time on a New York street, brushes his hair back, and softly says, "Your girl is lovely, Hubble," hearts around the world broke in unison. The film struck a chord not just as a love story, but as a reflection of its time. Post-war America, McCarthyism, and the growing divide between idealism and complacency. Its cultural impact was immediate. The Way We Were became one of the top-grossing films of 1973, earning over $50 million domestically, a massive success for the era. The theme song, sung by Streisand herself, became one of the most recognizable ballads in music history. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song and 2 Golden Globes, cementing its place in pop culture as the soundtrack of bittersweet love. But what truly made the movie immortal wasn't just the script or the song, it was the chemistry between Streisand and Redford. From their very first scene together, something unspoken hung in the air. Their glances carried meaning, their silences said more than dialogue ever could. Audiences felt it. Critics wrote that the connection between them was almost too real to be acting. Streisand's raw emotion met Redford's quiet restraint, creating a balance of fire and calm that no director could have staged. Behind the scenes, that magic didn't come easy. Robert Redford initially turned down the role of Hubble. He felt the script was too one-sided, too centered on Katie, leaving his character underwritten and emotionally thin. It was Barbra Streisand herself who pushed for changes. Determined to make the film a genuine partnership, she worked with Sydney Pollack to deepen Hubble's story, adding scenes that revealed his insecurities and inner struggles. She believed Redford's presence could elevate the film from a love story to a masterpiece, and she was right. Their dynamic on set mirrored the film itself. Redford was calm, disciplined, and reserved. Streisand was intense, expressive, and spontaneous. They admired each other's strengths but approached their craft in completely different ways. Redford preferred quiet focus, while Streisand brought energy and passion to every take. Yet somehow, those differences fueled their chemistry. Sydney Pollack later said that their opposites made the camera fall in love with both of them at the same time. Streisand herself later reflected on their contrasts with affection and humor. "We were such opposites," she said. "He was from the world of horses, I was allergic to them. Yet we kept trying to find out more about each other." That sentence captures the essence of both their characters and their real-life connection. Two people drawn together by curiosity and admiration, separated by the very differences that made them fascinating. The Way We Were was more than a film, it became a mirror for love that can't last but never truly ends. Its story of Katie and Hubble transcended time, echoing in the hearts of everyone who has ever loved someone they couldn't keep. And behind the scenes, that same emotional truth seemed to pulse between Streisand and Redford. Not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a quiet understanding between two artists who created something unforgettable together. Off-screen, Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford shared something that transcended what audiences saw in The Way We Were. Their chemistry was not confined to the camera. It lingered in the quiet spaces between takes, in letters, in long conversations, and later, in memories that neither of them ever quite let go. Yet despite decades of speculation, there has never been any confirmed evidence that their connection evolved into a formal romantic relationship. What existed between them was deeper, subtler, a kind of mutual fascination and emotional resonance that, in Streisand's own words, wasn't about love as much as it was about understanding. In her 2023 memoir My Name is Barbra, Streisand offers an intimate glimpse into that bond. She doesn't fan the flames of rumor. Instead, she paints a portrait of a man she admired deeply, not just for his beauty or talent but for his quiet strength. She describes how, during filming, she often felt a pull toward Redford. Not in a romantic or possessive way, but in the way an artist feels drawn to another who speaks the same unspoken language. "We were curious about each other," she writes. "He came from such a different world than I did, but that difference made him endlessly fascinating." That curiosity turned into a friendship that lasted decades. Even as their careers took them in different directions, Streisand conquering the worlds of film and music, Redford dedicating himself to directing and environmental activism, they remained in touch, occasionally sharing letters or phone calls. What bound them wasn't proximity but mutual respect. Redford, known for his stoic grace, rarely spoke about his personal life, yet he made exceptions when it came to Streisand. In interviews, he referred to her as remarkable, brilliant, and a perfectionist in the best way. Streisand, for her part, often described him as the most beautiful man I ever worked with and one of the most intelligent. But it was in her memoir, and in her most recent interviews following Redford's death, that the true emotional depth of their connection finally came to light. One of the most moving revelations came from a story she shared about their final phone call. According to Ola, USA, Streisand recalled that Redford's last words to her were, "I love you dearly, and I always will." It was a line that echoed the very essence of The Way We Were, a love not confined to romance, but expanded by time, distance, and the kind of affection that never fades. Streisand said that hearing those words broke her heart and comforted it at the same time. It was so like him, she reflected. Direct, honest, simple, and full of feeling. Another anecdote, shared with E! Online, captured the tenderness of their last meeting. Streisand described how Redford came to her home for lunch, long after they had both stepped away from the film spotlight. They talked about art, a shared passion neither had fully explored with each other before. "We discussed art," she said. "And we decided to send each other our first drawings." There was something poetic about that. Two artists who had built their lives on performance and precision deciding, in their later years, to express themselves through something imperfect and personal. It was as if they were allowing themselves to be vulnerable again, as they had been on that movie set decades earlier. When Redford passed, Streisand's public tribute was a love letter to their shared past. "Every day on the set of The Way We Were was exciting, intense, and pure joy," she wrote in a statement shared with Smooth Radio. The choice of words, pure joy, spoke volumes. Despite their differences, despite the professional pressures and personal contrasts, the experience had been one of the highlights of her life. She went on to say, "We were such opposites, he was from the world of horses, I was allergic to them. Yet we kept trying to find out more about each other." That line, so simple yet evocative, reveals a truth that went beyond the film. Their differences weren't obstacles. They were the reason their connection felt so alive. Streisand's tribute continued with words that captured the magnitude of her admiration. Bob was charismatic, intelligent, intense, always interesting, and one of the finest actors ever. There was no artifice in her tone, no attempt to rewrite their history into something more sensational. It was simply a reflection of the gratitude she felt toward a man who had shared something rare with her, the kind of emotional partnership that actors often seek but seldom find. For Streisand, Redford was not just a co-star but a mirror. Where she was spontaneous and emotional, he was restrained and deliberate. She often said that his stillness grounded her, while her intensity challenged him. Sidney Pollack, their director, once remarked that Bob and Barbra balanced each other like a scale. Without him, she might have flown away. Without her, he might have stayed too still. That balance is precisely what made their on-screen love believable and their off-screen friendship unforgettable. Over the years, Streisand has spoken about the challenges of maintaining genuine connections in Hollywood. Fame isolates, she has said, and trust becomes a rare currency. Redford was one of the few she could trust completely. He didn't play games, she once noted. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just was. That honesty made him stand out in an industry built on illusion. Redford, for his part, often credited Streisand with teaching him something essential about vulnerability. He once said that acting opposite her required him to strip away everything and just be present. That kind of artistic honesty left a lasting mark on both of them. Even decades later, Streisand admitted that she could never watch The Way We Were without feeling overwhelmed. "It's hard," she confessed in an interview. "It's like watching a memory, not a movie." Their story isn't one of scandal or secret love affairs. It's something more profound. It's about two people who met at the perfect artistic moment in their lives, when they could see each other clearly and respect each other fully. It's about connection without possession, affection without definition. In a world obsessed with labels, Streisand and Redford's relationship defied them all. And so, when Redford said, "I love you dearly, and I always will," it wasn't a declaration of romance, it was an acknowledgement of something eternal. It was the echo of Hubble and Katie, yes, but it was also the truth of Bob and Barbra. Two souls who understood each other, even when the world could not. Their story reminds us that not all great love stories are romantic. Some are built on trust, admiration, and the kind of shared history that doesn't fade with time. Streisand's voice still trembles with emotion when she speaks of him, not because of what might have been, but because of what truly was, a lifelong friendship rooted in artistry, respect, and genuine affection. In the end, their bond remains one of Hollywood's most beautiful enigmas. A connection that neither began nor ended with The Way We Were, but lived quietly, sincerely, in the space between two extraordinary lives. Over the decades, one question has continued to follow Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford like a quiet shadow. Were they ever really in love? The power of their chemistry in The Way We Were was so overwhelming, so authentic, that audiences and journalists alike found it impossible to separate the actors from the characters they portrayed. Katie Morosky and Hubble Gardner, the politically fiery idealist and the golden, carefree dreamer, became a symbol of impossible love. And when the cameras stopped rolling, many wondered if that love had somehow bled into real life. Speculative reports over the years have tried to fill in the blanks. Gossip magazines, biographies, and entertainment outlets all attempted to trace the line between professional admiration and personal affection. But for all the speculation, there's never been a definitive answer. Only the unspoken acknowledgement that something real existed between them, even if it wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. Robert Redford, known for his quiet dignity and fiercely private nature, was often the reason such rumors fizzled out. He rarely entertained talk about his personal life, preferring to let his work speak for itself. Yet his initial hesitation to join The Way We Were offers subtle insight into the dynamic between him and Streisand, and why their connection was so complex. According to People.com, Redford was initially reluctant to take the role of Hubble Gardner. He felt that the original script leaned too heavily toward Katie's perspective and that his character lacked depth. He didn't want to be just the pretty boy opposite Barbra, one associate recalled. Redford wanted substance, a chance to build a character with real motivation and conflict, not just one meant to highlight Streisand's star power. Barbra, however, wasn't content to let the project go without him. She had envisioned Redford from the start. To her, he wasn't just another co-star, he was Hubble, the embodiment of quiet charisma, masculine grace, and the inner turmoil that made the story so heartbreaking. Streisand reportedly advocated for script revisions, ensuring Hubble's character had the complexity Redford wanted. Her determination wasn't just professional, it was personal. She wanted a partner in the story, someone who could challenge her on screen and make the emotional connection feel authentic. Redford ultimately agreed, and what followed was cinematic history. But that early hesitation, as Bollywood Chaudhries noted in a retrospective, revealed much about Redford's boundaries. He was wary of being overshadowed or misinterpreted. His instincts told him that audiences would believe their love too easily, that the illusion might consume their real selves. And in many ways, he was right. After the film's release, speculation about their relationship became almost unavoidable. The passion that played out on screen felt too natural, too raw, to be merely acted. Some later accounts, including reports cited by Mamamia, suggested that Streisand may have developed an infatuation with Redford during or after filming. She adored him, one unnamed source recalled in a biography. She thought he was everything a man should be, intelligent, gentle, thoughtful. But Redford always kept a respectful distance. Those close to him described his feelings as deeply fond but grounded in friendship. He admired her brilliance, her artistry, and her fire, but he was careful never to blur professional lines. And yet, the boundary between intense friendship and romantic affection has always been a delicate one, especially in Hollywood, where emotion is both a craft and a commodity. For actors like Streisand and Redford, who immerse themselves so completely in their roles, the intimacy created on set can feel disarmingly real. Director Sidney Pollack once noted that their connection wasn't acting, it was communication. He described moments between takes where they would sit in silence, simply looking at each other, processing what they had just performed. There was always something happening between them, Pollack said, but it didn't need to be labeled. That lack of a label is precisely what made their relationship so enduring. They existed in that rare emotional space where mutual respect and quiet affection overlap, where friendship can hold the same weight as love. Streisand herself later addressed the rumors with characteristic honesty. In an interview decades after The Way We Were, she laughed softly and said, "People wanted to believe we were in love, and maybe that's because we made them believe it. But no, it was a beautiful friendship." Her tone carried warmth, not denial. She wasn't dismissing their connection. She was defining it on her own terms. For Redford, that friendship was a constant thread throughout his life. In a rare comment, he once said that working with Streisand was as challenging as it was rewarding. He admired her fearlessness, even when it clashed with his quiet approach. She cared so deeply, he said. About everything. Their differences created a balance that neither of them seemed to find elsewhere in their careers, a partnership that pushed them both toward their best. As years went by, the line between what was real and what was imagined continued to blur for audiences. Fans saw them as the eternal lovers from The Way We Were, even as both went on to build separate lives. Redford with his wife Sybil Saggers, and Streisand with her husband James Brolin. But despite their marriages and decades apart, the fascination with their connection never faded. The truth, however, lies not in rumors or imagined romance but in the quiet facts of how they spoke about each other until the very end. When Streisand broke her silence after Redford's death, her words weren't those of a woman mourning a lost lover, but of someone grieving a soulmate of another kind. "Every day on the set," she said, "was exciting, intense, and pure joy." She didn't talk about secret moments or hidden affection. She spoke of joy, the rare, creative joy of two artists who understood each other completely. And that's the key takeaway. Streisand's tribute does not confirm a past romance, nor does it try to rewrite history. Instead, it honors the connection they did share, one built on mutual admiration, trust, and emotional honesty. She called Redford charismatic, intelligent, and one of the finest actors ever, emphasizing respect over sentimentality. It was a farewell from an equal, not from a lost lover. In the end, the speculation may never end, perhaps because the best kind of love stories are the ones left partly untold. But what Streisand and Redford shared was real in its own right. A deep human bond that didn't need romance to make it beautiful. Their relationship defied the easy definitions Hollywood thrives on. It wasn't a scandal, a secret affair, or a tragedy. It was, quite simply, two people who met in a moment of artistic perfection and carried that connection for the rest of their lives. So when fans ask, did they ever really date? The truest answer might be, it doesn't matter. What mattered, what still matters, is the affection, respect, and timeless chemistry that defined them. In Streisand's eyes, Redford will always be the man who made The Way We Were possible, not because of a love affair, but because of a bond too pure and too private for anyone else to define. Robert Redford's passing on September 16, 2025, marked the end of a cinematic era. He died peacefully in his sleep at his home in Sundance, Utah, the sanctuary he built decades ago, a place that reflected everything he valued: nature, solitude, and authenticity. According to his longtime publicist, Redford was surrounded by those he loved, in the place he loved. It was the kind of quiet exit he might have written for one of his own characters: understated, deeply human, and full of grace. In the days following his death, tributes poured in from across the world. Actors, directors, and fans alike remembered not only his film legacy but also his lifelong dedication to art, the environment, and the independent film movement. Redford's name wasn't just attached to box office hits, it was synonymous with integrity. The Sundance Institute, which he founded in 1981, had transformed countless careers and redefined independent cinema. To those who knew him personally, he was a man of conviction, a storyteller who preferred sincerity over spectacle. Yet, despite the outpouring of affection, one detail remained conspicuously absent: an official cause of death. Neither his family nor his representatives released any medical explanation, choosing instead to emphasize privacy and peace. The only public statement confirmed that his passing was natural and serene, offering no further elaboration. Naturally, media outlets began to speculate, some suggesting heart complications, others hinting at long-term illness. But these claims remain unconfirmed. Friends close to Redford dismissed any sensational theories, insisting that he had been in good spirits in his final weeks, spending time with family and quietly working on art projects near his Utah home. He always wanted to go there, one associate told reporters. He said he felt most himself under those skies. For those who admired him, Redford's silence in death felt consistent with the life he lived. He had always protected his privacy fiercely, preferring to let his work and his actions define him. Even in his later years, he resisted the attention that often comes with fame. He never wanted his death to be a spectacle, one longtime friend remarked. He wanted it to be simple, like his life away from Hollywood. Among the many tributes that followed, none resonated as deeply as Barbra Streisand's. Within hours of the news breaking, she took to social media and released a heartfelt statement. Her words were not long or elaborate, but they carried the weight of 50 years of shared history. Every day on the set of The Way We Were was exciting, intense, and pure joy, she wrote. Bob was charismatic, intelligent, intense, always interesting, and one of the finest actors ever. The timing of her tribute revealed much about their bond. Streisand was not one to rush into public statements, especially about something so personal. But in this case, her response came almost immediately, a testament to how deeply Redford's passing affected her. It wasn't a press obligation, it was instinctive. Her words spoke not only of admiration but also of loss, the loss of a partner who had shaped one of the defining chapters of her life. As the news spread, clips from The Way We Were began to circulate again, the final scene where Streisand's Katie brushes Redford's hair from his forehead, whispering, "Your girl is lovely, Hubble." The world watched it anew, realizing that the line, once a symbol of bittersweet farewell, had now taken on a hauntingly real dimension. It was as if that cinematic goodbye had become their final goodbye. Friends close to Streisand said she was deeply shaken by the news. Though they had not seen each other frequently in recent years, their friendship endured through quiet exchanges, letters, calls, and art. The final phone call she once described, where Redford told her, "I love you dearly, and I always will," now felt like a prophecy. Robert Redford's passing leaves behind an unmatched legacy. He was an actor who brought emotional honesty to every role, a director who sought truth in storytelling, and an activist who believed in using his platform for good. But beyond all that, he was a man who understood the value of simplicity, of a life well lived, of beauty found in nature, and of love expressed through actions rather than words. And for Barbra Streisand, his death was more than the loss of a friend. It was the closing of a chapter that had defined much of her artistic soul. Theirs was not a love story in the traditional sense, but it was one of the deepest emotional partnerships Hollywood had ever seen, one that began under bright studio lights and ended, quietly, under the stars of Sundance. The world may never know the details of his final moments, but perhaps that's exactly as Redford would have wanted it. No drama. No spectacle. Just peace, in the mountains he loved, surrounded by those who loved him, and remembered forever by the woman who once captured his heart on film. When news broke of Robert Redford's death, the world fell silent, and none more meaningfully than Barbra Streisand's. 4 days, she said nothing. Then, with quiet grace, she finally spoke. Her tribute was simple, heartfelt, and deeply human. Every day on the set of The Way We Were was exciting, intense and pure joy. We were such opposites. He was from the world of horses, I was allergic to them. Yet we kept trying to find out more about each other. Bob was charismatic, intelligent, intense, always interesting, and one of the finest actors ever. In those few lines, Streisand captured decades of shared history. She didn't speak like a co-star offering condolences. She spoke like someone who knew him. By calling him Bob, not Robert Redford, she stripped away the legend to reveal the man she admired and cherished. Her tribute resonated not because it was dramatic, but because it was intimate. It recalled the contrasts that defined them, his calm against her intensity, his reserve against her passion, and how those opposites made their bond unforgettable. She also shared 2 deeply personal memories. A final lunch, where they talked about art and promised to exchange drawings, and a last phone call, which ended with Redford saying, "I love you dearly, and I always will." Those words, tender and final, became the heart of her message. Not confirmation of romance, but proof of enduring affection. Yet Streisand's restraint spoke as loudly as her words. She offered no details about Redford's health or final days. Instead, she honored him with the same dignity he embodied in life. Her post was about art, friendship, and gratitude, not gossip. The tone was reverent and nostalgic. She remembered their time on The Way We Were as pure joy, echoing the bittersweet farewell their characters shared in that film's final scene, a goodbye now mirrored in real life. For fans, her words felt like a curtain gently closing on one of Hollywood's most beloved pairings. She didn't confirm a hidden romance, nor did she deny the deep emotional truth between them. She simply let it live, undefined, eternal. In the end, Streisand's message wasn't about death, but remembrance. By breaking her silence, she reminded the world that the most powerful connections aren't always romantic, they're the ones that leave an imprint on the soul. Her goodbye to Robert Redford was tender, timeless, and filled with love. When Robert Redford passed, the tributes that followed felt like the collective heartbeat of Hollywood itself slowing for a moment. A chorus of voices mourning not just a man, but an era. Across the industry, from old friends to younger actors inspired by his quiet brilliance, the message was universal. Something irreplaceable had been lost. Jane Fonda, his co-star in Barefoot in the Park, 1967, and lifelong friend, wrote that Redford had the soul of a poet trapped in the body of a movie star. Their friendship had lasted nearly 6 decades, marked by playful teasing, mutual admiration, and creative collaboration. He never needed to prove anything, Fonda said. He just was, authentic, intelligent, principled. Meryl Streep, who worked with Redford on Out of Africa, 1985, shared a photograph from the film set, accompanied by a short but piercing caption. "He taught me stillness, how to listen, how to let the silence do the talking." Coming from one of the most meticulous actors of her generation, the comment revealed how Redford's subtlety had become his most powerful lesson to others. Dustin Hoffman called him a man who lived his politics quietly, and his compassion loudly. Bob Woodward, the journalist Redford immortalized in All the President's Men, 1976, remembered him not as a performer but as a friend. He believed in truth, not just as an idea, but as a duty. "He didn't play me, he carried the spirit of journalism with honor." Major outlets echoed the same sentiment. The Guardian called him Hollywood's conscience, an icon who refused to be consumed by fame. The New York Times praised his dual identity as artist and activist, the matinee idol who founded Sundance, the global force who championed independent voices. Wikipedia's flood of edits in the hours after his passing, thousands of fans updating his page, adding quotes, facts, and memories, became a digital vigil, proof of how deeply his legacy resonated. But among all the tributes, Barbra Streisand's words stood apart. Where others spoke about Redford's career, she spoke about his soul. Her remembrance added a personal, emotional current to the public mourning. It was as if her voice carried the quiet grief of those who had truly known him. Not just the actor, but the man behind the camera, the one who hated pretense, who found solace in art and nature. Her post, tender and nostalgic, bridged the gap between the myth and the man. When Streisand wrote, "Every day on set was pure joy," she was not simply reminiscing, she was grounding the public's grief in something real. Fans could imagine him, laughing beside her, the two of them bathed in the golden light of the 1970s, creating magic that still feels alive 50 years later. Her words gave the mourning a face, the face of connection. That connection is part of why The Way We Were endures. Long after the film's release in 1973, it has become shorthand for bittersweet love, the ache of what once was and never could be again. The final scene, with Streisand's Katie brushing a lock of hair from Redford's Hubbell's forehead, remains one of cinema's most haunting goodbyes. Critics have called it the perfect metaphor for memory itself, beautiful, incomplete, eternal. The cultural memory of their pairing has outlived every generation's definition of romance. Younger audiences, discovering the film on streaming platforms, still describe feeling that same pang, the sense that they're watching two souls say farewell in both fiction and reality. That timelessness isn't just about chemistry, it's about truth. The Way We Were captured two artists who didn't need to act love, they simply understood it. Their relationship, whether purely platonic or tinged with unspoken affection, continues to teach us something profound about art, connection, and celebrity. In a world obsessed with labels and headlines, Streisand and Redford embodied something subtler: respect. Their bond was built on shared craft, creative trust, and emotional honesty. They didn't exploit their closeness for publicity, they protected it. In that sense, their story challenges the modern idea of fame. It reminds us that the most powerful relationships in Hollywood aren't always romantic. Sometimes they're built on the mutual recognition of greatness. Redford and Streisand represented two sides of the same artistic coin. She, expressive and intuitive; he, restrained and reflective. Together, they created balance and beauty. As the tributes poured in, one line from Streisand's post echoed in every headline: "I was lucky to know him." Simple words, but devastating in context. Because at its core, legacy is about how we are remembered, not by the masses, but by those whose lives we touched. Redford's peers remembered him as a visionary, an activist, a craftsman. Streisand remembered him as Bob. And in that single, personal distinction lies the truest measure of loss, the hole left behind not just in cinema, but in the hearts of those who loved him quietly, deeply, and for a lifetime. As the story of Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford comes full circle, we're left with more than nostalgia. We're left with questions that can't be easily answered. Their connection, immortalized through The Way We Were and echoed through decades of interviews, tributes, and quiet admiration, has become one of Hollywood's most beautiful enigmas. Was it love? Was it friendship? Or was it something in between, a kind of emotional alchemy that exists only between two artists who see each other completely? Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable, the kind that radiates beyond the script and camera lens. Audiences felt it in every glance, every silence, every heartbreak between Katie and Hubbell. But what's fascinating is how that intensity mirrored their real lives. Streisand, the perfectionist dreamer, and Redford, the introspective minimalist. Two souls from entirely different worlds who somehow created harmony. For years, fans and journalists speculated about whether their connection went beyond friendship. Streisand's memoir and recent tributes confirm affection and depth, but never a confessed romance. That silence, maintained for decades, feels deliberate, an act of respect. It suggests that not all great connections need to be labeled or explained. Some simply are. When Redford passed, Streisand's silence spoke volumes. 4 days, she said nothing. And then, when she finally broke that silence, her words carried weight, the quiet gravity of a loss deeply felt. Her tribute wasn't about publicity or nostalgia. It was about gratitude. She spoke of joy, admiration, and the small human moments that defined their friendship. Lunches filled with laughter, art shared between them, Words like "I love you dearly" that blurred the line between friendship and something gentler, perhaps eternal. In that way, Streisand's voice became the emotional punctuation at the end of Redford's story. While the world mourned the legend, she mourned the man, the collaborator who challenged her, inspired her, and reminded her of what truth looks like in art. And through that, her silence, and the breaking of it, became part of his legacy too. Their story invites reflection on what truly connects people. Maybe love isn't always romantic. Maybe friendship, at its deepest, becomes something sacred, a space of trust and shared purpose. What Streisand and Redford built was a testament to that idea, that the real chemistry, the kind that outlasts fame and even life itself, comes from mutual respect and emotional understanding. So as we look back on their journey, from the laughter on set to the tears behind the scenes, from the glamour of the 70s to the quiet farewells of today, we're left wondering, what exactly was the nature of their bond? Was it love disguised as friendship? Or friendship elevated to love? Perhaps that mystery is what keeps their story alive. Perhaps that's why The Way We Were still feels like a living heartbeat, because it wasn't just fiction. It was the echo of something real, something too intimate to define. And maybe, in the end, the greatest love story here isn't about romance at all. It's about two souls, an actress and an actor, an artist and a dreamer, who found in each other a reflection of beauty, truth, and time itself. Their connection reminds us why we love movies, why we cherish art, and why some people, even after they're gone, never truly leave us. Dizzy in the end, perhaps the greatest love story here is the one between art and friendship, and how two souls found in each other a reflection that endures beyond time. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts below. What do you think Barbra and Robert's bond truly was? And could there be more to uncover, more letters, more memories, waiting to be revealed in time? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of timeless love, friendship, and the legacies that never fade.